afternoon and welcome to the Guyana Extractive Sector Transparency Week. If this is your first session with us during this conference, we are really happy to have you here. If this is one of the many you have attended today, it is great to have you back. We have another interesting panel discussion in store for you. And without further delay, I would like to get us started. The topic is competing interest in the extractive sector, how to reduce risk and conflict and reap benefits. So first of all, I'd like to ask Reina Guindes to give some context for all of our participants, and then we will hear from our esteemed panel of panelists.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session, which happens to be the last session in a very, very busy day that we've had today. And I'd just like to begin by giving you a little bit of an introductory presentation, that aims to stimulate some debate and frame our lively discussion as we get ready, to end this first day of the virtual event. So we do have some slides, and we'd like to move to the next slide. And basically, Guyana, just like many resource-rich nations, is a magnet for extractive industry investment. However, as in many cases throughout the globe, this comes at a price. Affected citizens, often Amerindian groups, view the environmental ramifications of sector projects with great concern as they encroach on land use and access, on water rights for drinking, agriculture, and protected natural heritage. These competing interests highlight the conundrum that many countries face: economic growth versus ecological and environmental sustainability and sustainable livelihoods. Of course, this is further exacerbated in these days by global climate change and the pandemic. They challenge the extractive sector when it comes to economic growth and development. They have the opportunity and the potential to increase opportunities for corruption, also increase competition over land and water use and access, and their impacts can be felt direct, indirectly, and cumulatively. In the following slide, these can potentially result in a series of grievances that, if not addressed early on, can escalate into stressors, resulting in social conflict, environmental degradation, climate change, governance, and economic ramification. These stressors result in anything from reduced land access to expectations that are not met to inadequate benefits. They surface in all kinds of forms, in deforestation, water issues, overfishing, habitat loss, and impact global climate change. They can see a rise and a lack of transparency, inequity, insufficient planning, management, and monitoring, as well as broken promises. As seen in the following slide, challenges, of course, from citizens manifest themselves in various forms, ranging from statements made to media outlets, social media, campaigns to public protests and standoffs. Such protests are met with repression, human rights abuses, and criminalization through the courts in some cases. These have economic consequences, which manifest in direct and indirect losses, something that we don't often talk about, not just for a country, not just for the sector, but for companies, investors, and ordinary people alike, just like you and I. The losses are evident, as on this slide, it only takes a few minutes to note that everyone pays the price when the sector is not managed, regulated, and monitored effectively, and is not inclusive of consultation, is not transparent and open to sharing of information. There are many different types of impacts, and many of these are felt as communities often have expectations that aren't met. And governments, the state, stands to lose reputational risk. So there's a whole series of these kinds of economic consequences. As of July 2020, in the next slide, you will see that in Latin America and the Caribbean, there were experienced some 277 growing social conflicts around the extractive sector, most of them in mining. Some of them were transnational in nature. Most have predominated in around water issues. The illustrated graph highlights some of the key conflicts reported by communities and civil society organizations. And as you can see in the graph, there's a series of different countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, with Mexico reporting some of the largest number of conflicts, to Chile and Peru. Governments have lost billions in investment. And it's not just the governments that have lost money in terms of revenue collection, royalties and taxes, but it's also companies. Just to give you a small example, there's a cost of conflict. You know, a major world-class mining project with capital expenditures anywhere between $3 to $5 billion could suffer costs of roughly 20 million per week if delayed in production as a result of conflicts and grievances. In the next slide, identifying drivers for conflict is one of the key processes to reducing risk. And this is very important. This is both for the state sector, companies, citizens, and consultation and access to information is key, as is good social investment and transparent information in and around the sector. Addressing grievances early on is a way to ensure that there are mechanisms for capturing these. Ultimately, it is important to understand your role, responsibility, and accountability from where you sit, be you sitting at the seat of government, industry, civil society, community. It's very important to understand the role and responsibility and the role that you play in ensuring that risk is reduced and that mitigation and management comes to the forefront. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Miss Gunduz. And just again, with these introductions provided by Ms. Rina Gunduz, Chief of Party of the Guyana Extractive Sector Transparency Project, I would like to invite our panelists to add their perspective to this discussion. First of all, Mr. Zulfikar Ali, the Chairman of American Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you very much, Kitty. I hope everyone can hear me. And excellent presentation by Rina as well. And I think it flows exactly to some of the points that I want to raise. So I'm bringing really a private sector perspective to this. I'm the chairman of AmCham Guyana, the American Chamber of Commerce. Now, as you know, many in the private sector are one way or the other participants or beneficiaries from the extractive industry. And it is widely known that resource extraction fuels the global economy. That is how important it is. It contributes substantially to the national economies of countries from which oil and gas and minerals are derived from. As a matter of fact, in 2007, energy and mining companies made up 6 of the 10 largest companies in the world and 5 of the 10 most profitable, with ExxonMobil topping the list as the world's most profitable company. Within recent times, it has been estimated that close to 90% of our new hydrocarbon production will come from developing countries. In addition to contributions to the national coffers, extractive companies impact local economies as well through the procurement of goods and services, the production and distribution and sales that accompanies those services, the generation of employment. Hundreds of thousands, millions of people are employed within this sector, as well as the high social and community investments that are made. So you can see how critical it is that the role that the private sector play in the extractive industry. Here in Guyana, the situation is no different. We have many large and small companies in the private sector that are involved in the extractive industry. From a sector perspective, the private sector wants to see a sustainable development of the extractive sector. And I've stated before, there is an acknowledgement of the critical importance of this sector to the national economy. So what are some of the key issues from a private sector perspective? The issues are no different from those that are well known within the industry or the sector around the world. And they represent areas such as governance, transparency, and accountability, many of which Rena just mentioned in her presentation. And I would like to highlight why these are important for the private sector. And one of the main reasons is that the extractive industry, there's a recognition that it can contribute to sustainable development when projects are implemented well and preserve the rights of people that it affects and communities that it affects. And if those and if the benefits they generate are well used as well. So to achieve this, governance and transparency have to be harmonized to deliver that objective. We all know of the resource course. We spoke about it a lot, and with the advent of oil in 2015 in Guyana, it has been widely discussed. But it is also often cited not only as a problem, but it's something that we have to be aware of on a national level, as the activities of the extractive sector fails to consistently and directly affect economic growth and expand economic opportunities. So in a number of cases, it has actually worsened conditions and the quality of life of population. Reason being, it has to be managed very carefully. So lack of proper governance and accountability within the sector would obviously contribute greatly to this. So on a private sector perspective, what are some of the mitigation measures that we see could be implemented or could work for us not to fall into what I've just discussed? So we need to see more of a coordination of the natural resource use and management that will help to mitigate the conflicts that Rena mentioned in her presentation. We have to see the establishment of a more formal mechanism within government and its various agencies. We need to see the development and implementation of a regional land use plan for Guyana, in our case, for all 10 regions, including zoning for various activities in towns and other populated areas as well. We need to see more incentives to the private sector to retool their enterprises with a view to increasing their efficiency, especially for those that are local companies. Those are the ones that require the resources, financial and otherwise, to really do that. We have to look at reviewing the performance of concessionaires to ensure compliance with national laws. That is very important as well. We need to see enhanced transparency and accountability through increased monitoring and enforcement of the subsectors and alignment with the extractive industry transparency initiative, which we have signed on to, as well as the reform of agencies such as like the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission to improve their efficiency and transparency in the regulation of the mining sectors. So I know my colleagues will probably add more, and I know there are a lot of speakers, but I'm here to answer any question and to discuss further on the points that I've just raised as well.
Mr. Ali, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. And yes, we have a fellow panelist here with us today. With that, I would like to welcome our next speaker, Ms. Vanessa Ban, the chairperson from Board of Directors from the Guyana Forestry Commission. Ms. Ban, we are looking forward to hearing your perspective on the issue of conflict and mitigation.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining this conference. Thank you for this opportunity to represent the Guyana Forestry Commission. I thank the organizers for this invitation. I believe it would be remiss of me not to commence my comments by extending, on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Guyana Forestry Commission, our commiserations to those persons who are affected by the flooding, not only within the forestry sector, the stakeholders within the forestry sector, but in mining and all the other extractive industries and across our country. So I just would like to put that out because there are several persons who are affected by that, and I know that our own respective industries and our economy will be affected by it as well. So we are here to discuss these competing interests within the extractive sector, and within the context of the forestry sector. I'd like to thank Rena for setting the stage and giving such a kind of comprehensive overview of some of the issues we need to highlight. With regard to the Guyana Forestry Commission, which was established in 1979, with the overall mandate to ensure that there's sustainable forestry, but more specifically to support the forest sector development, to address climate change actions, to look at issues related to forest governance. The forestry sector supports directly about 25,000 persons with regard to employment. The forest itself in Guyana covers over 85% of our land mass. And the production level, just to give you, kind of an overall picture, with regard to production last year, the value of exports was 31 million United States dollars. So that's just to give you kind of an overview, a very brief overview. So if we were to think of our caption speaks of, what are the competing interests? And I prefer to use the word competing instead of conflicts. Within the forestry sector, not only at the sector level, but also at the level of stakeholders. As the previous speaker just said, there are those overlapping land use issues of multiple users. They're miners, they're persons who have agricultural leases. The mining is different. You have gold mining, bauxite mining. There's manganese mining restarting very shortly. There's quarrying, so there are different. These occurs at different parts of the landscape, and there's also the mangrove forest, which many times we often forget when we speak of Guyana's forests. One of the other competing issues that can cause quite a lot of challenges is the kind of overlap of the policy arena, and the fact that essentially the Mining Act supersedes the Forest Act. While we recognize the legislative framework and the importance for the need to have these various types of legislation, we need to see how these are affecting negatively persons within the sector. But I will, that's a bit of a digression. I will elaborate a bit more on that. Mr. Ali mentioned just now the issue of a land use plan and the need for a land use plan. There is a land use plan, I believe, but what we need is an overarching policy, one that helps to enhance coordination across our various sectors. One of the other issues that is affecting the forestry sector, and I dare say all the other extractive sectors, but more particularly in the mining sector, is the issue of a kind of a revolving workforce. So company X, perhaps within the forestry sector, may invest in capacity building, for their workers, and it comes at a cost that's necessary. But what quite often happens is that very soon after having received that training, that person moves on out of the company and goes to another one. And sometimes even into the mining sector, which is a lot more, has a lot more money and can remunerate, persons, and they say better than within the forestry sector. They're a lot more blessed. I see Mr. Dennis is smiling at me. Um, and the other challenges that we face is, for instance, this issue of uh, access to areas in the context of the use of roads, and the maintenance of those roads, who maintains them, who collects tolls. So those are some of the challenges that persons within the forestry sector face. But I dare say they're not insurmountable. I believe that um, collectively we can look at having a bit more coordination, enhancing the coordination across our various agencies. We like to work a lot more collaboratively with the GTMC and the other natural resources agencies, so that we can help to address the issues, but not only at the level of government and the level of these government agencies, but also at the level of the stakeholders themselves, the forest concessionaires, the miners, the agricultural development project developers, so that if if one knows where one intends to go mining within a forest concession, and we can come to some agreement when that person can have access, who puts, how the investment is shared, the cost is shared with regard to putting in the road infrastructure and those kinds of things. I believe that those can help to address some of the challenges that we face.
Thank you so much, Miss Ben. And since you mentioned our next presenter, is it okay if we move on to Mr. Newell Dennison?
Yes, please.
Thank you so much. So our next panelist is Mr. Newell Dennison, Commissioner from Guyana Geology and Mines Commission. We are very much looking forward to his perspective on the topic of conflict.
Well, thank you, Kitty. Good evening, good day, everyone. I was here not too long ago, so I'm back again. And I gather that even though my presentation is rather an overview that illustrates the circumstances that the topic speaks to, I think in a general sense, all that has been said so far will probably be present in what I have to say. I have a mouthful, so I'll try to go very quickly. So as an overview, Guyana has had typically traditionally, Guyana has had an agro-driven economy. Since post-World War II, the natural resources extractive sector grew in prominence, and with the decline in sugar's fortunes and the slow transition to alternative agricultural products, a space was created for the mining sector to exert an equally significant level of economic importance. Gold prices have been fair generally, and mining has become a dominant player in Guyana's economic outlook. Mining provides employment of about 20,000 to 30,000 persons directly, and more than double that indirectly. It has been the prominent foreign exchange earner. It provides a platform for significant foreign direct investment. It continues to drive development in technology, fosters hinterland development, and is a change agent for the still emerging manufacturing and industrial sectors. I just point out here that I intend to focus on mining, the mining subsector, and ignore almost exclusively the oil and gas. As a point of observation, outside of bauxite mining subsector, which has contracted significantly, Guyana has only experienced 3 large-scale world-class gold mines within the past 50 years. Imagine that. What I'm reporting, therefore, is in relation to the regulated small and medium-scale mining, which even under the situation where their production is inefficient in the mining cycle and particularly in the area of recovery, and where leakages in declaration and very limited downstream endeavors are, you know, ills of that sector, it is still something that we consider very contributive and important to our national economy. With a robust mining legislation covering the entire mining cycle, including environment and safety, the sector has much room to grow, considering the extent of mineralization that Guyana notionally has yet to convert to productive mining. So at this point in time, we have just done some geochemical and geological exploration work, and the areas that we've covered are in the extent of about 17,000 square kilometers in the known mineralized corridors. So we are expecting gold, diamonds, platinum group elements, rare earth elements, forever materials. All of those are very relevant to how this sector is going to progress in the future. And from a social development viewpoint, Guyana has considerable resources of readily accessible indigenous materials for housing, construction, and infrastructure. The challenge of competitive power and energy options near industrial centers continues. The country is blessed, however, with a formidable array of options for energy. High capital inputs, relative medium to long-term project options, for capital representation for justification, probably skewed in the wrong direction, make typically available financing mechanisms for the time being out of reach. There is optimism that now that we have oil and gas, that might change. So what has GYEITI confronted us with? Like many third world countries, and especially those that have emerged in a measured way from the experiment of nationalization to the reality of globalization, which has demanded a highly competitive environment for conducting commercial affairs, Guyana has confidentiality arrangements and discretions of conduct that are more and more out of place in this modern era. From my own experience, that circumstance was not a creature of the state alone, but it can obviously present opportunities for the well-documented experiences faced by countries and companies where unfair practices, corruption, benefits not reaching the constituency, all of those things exist. There has been a call for retreat from from those arrangements and for an increasingly more open situation. Conventional wisdom directs government and their agencies towards the open standard. Politically correct commentary leaves little room for substantial arguments against that standard. I am certainly not motivated to be on the other side of conventional wisdom or political correctness. So it is clear.
Speaking of that, Mr. Dennison, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. I would like to move on to our next panelist, but in closing, would you like to say something just to close up your part of the introductions?
Well, essentially, I would want to jump on the bandwagon that has been mentioned by both speakers so far, and that the most critical conflict or competition really is in land use, multiple layers of land use, and the manner in which we go about trying to deal with those conflicts. And, you know, I don't think that we can ignore the trajectory of our development as it is today. I don't think we can ignore the fact that mining will have to play its role, because I can't see that we will be abandoning this trajectory of development for any other alternative. And just to also add a little bit on the matter of the flooding that Vanessa raised, I can't imagine what that cost to us will be. But miners are acutely aware of environment and these issues of the impact. Flooding is not good for mining. Droughts are not good for mining. So it isn't a case where they are just totally unaware and don't take care of the influences that they can have on that by their conduct in the field. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dennison. Thank you. Very appreciate your perspective. And now we have our next panelist, Mr. Denzel Roberts, Chief Fisheries Officer from Fisheries Department in the Ministry of Agriculture. Mr. Roberts, we would love to hear your perspective on the issue at hand.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I would like to thank the host for inviting the Fisheries Department to be part of this important event. Well, as a coastal state, fisheries is a very important subsector in the economy of Guyana. It is important in that it contributes to food nutrition security and in turn provides a cheap source of protein to the nation, and not only to the nation, to other nations, because 60% of our harvest is exported at an average of 70 million US dollars, which contributes to foreign exchange earnings. It also provides jobs, income earnings to a vulnerable part of the society and contributes to rural development. Apart from that, it employs quite a bit of females and single parents and in their processing plants and in the sales of the seafood. Before the advent of oil, we could safely say that fisheries was one of the most important activity in our marine resources, and we know that not just fisheries occupy that space. And with the oil, the advent of oil, we've had a lot of discussion regarding this this new activity. The fisheries in a nutshell, we have what you call in the marine sector the industrial fleet. We have the semi-industrial and we have the artisanal, which are mostly the from the rural areas that would go fishing. And we have a new tuna fisheries. This is all very important for us. We recognize that, and also we have a aquaculture sector, which is still to gain a firm footing, but we're working on it. And also we speak about the inland fisheries, which is more of a subsistence nature, but that doesn't take away the fact that it is very important for the livelihoods of the indigenous peoples in the hinterland areas. So our mandate in the fisheries department is to manage, promote, and regulate this sector so that it is sustainable. This is one of the sectors, the resource sectors, that if it's managed properly, it will be fine. It will be infinite. We will always have fish. It's not like you extract oil and after a while it goes. We have to ensure that it is managed properly so that it will be there for generations to come. And as the other speakers would have noted, I don't like to use the word conflicts because I prefer the word challenges. Because right now, because of the newness of the sector of the oil sector, we don't have much challenges in terms of, because their exploration is way out where we don't have many fishing activities. But with time, we will definitely have these activities. So we recognize as more users come in to play, our area will be reduced. So we already anticipate that the fishery sector will have reduced space in that area. Because if you put an oil well, obviously you will have a buffer zone so that you already take away that part of the fisheries. There's also the challenges of while they're carrying out their activities, the seismic activities, our fishermen, we have to take a step back so that they could do their activities. And at the same time, we would have noticed some abnormal activities, a beaching of a whale, some stingrays washing up. So we try to think that maybe is there something there that will affect our fisheries. Of course, we have to do further studies to ensure that if it's there or not. So we haven't had those studies yet, but we hope to be able to do that. There are also, what you say, the displacement of the fishermen when they in their fishing area, in terms of these guys when they will lay, if they want to lay pipelines or cables, we have to move. If you have an onshore facility, like for example, there was one facility we had to move some fishermen. We would negotiate with the companies to get a compensation, so they would not be feel left out or out of a job. With regarding to the inland fisheries, this is more, as I said, it's subsistence, but it's not less important because of the mining activities and the forest activities, which are happening. It is opening new grounds. More people are going there, so a lot of people would want to be fishing, and maybe they would put a lot of pressure on the streams and the rivers there. So we have that issue then with the mining activities. There sometimes they're mining in the river. They dig up the river bed, so you cause a displacement of even the river, the direction. Sometimes you could have accidental spills. So this would affect the health of the fishes, which will go on to the fishermen who catch the fish. So we recognize that the industries, even though they're all important, we need to be able to work together to be able to have maybe interagency meetings to discuss whenever we're doing something that could affect our population. So I think more or less that is it in a nutshell about the fishing sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roberts. And we are ready for our next panelist, Ms. Yandrine Thompson. She's the General Manager of Guyana Gold Board. We are eager to hear your perspective. Since mining was mentioned, I figured it is great to have you coming up next.
Very well. Thank you, Rena. Good afternoon, everyone, fellow panelists and viewers, attendees. The Guyana Gold Board and competing interests. Guyana Gold Board being to the end of the supply chain, in that after gold is mined and it's purchased, whether by traders or gold licensed gold dealers, then they come to the Guyana Gold Board to sell. So Guyana Gold Board deals with the physical metal. And as such, in keeping with our mandate, it is to ensure the correct treatment of gold trading in Guyana. And when it comes to that, overseeing the gold trading in Guyana, and we also have to take into consideration that the Guyana Gold Board is also the supervisory authority on gold trade in Guyana. Our limitations. One, because Guyana Gold Board is to the end of the supply chain, we need to be in contact with the origin of the metal. When I say the origin, where it's originated from, because we have to ensure strict compliance. When somebody is selling, when a client is selling to the Guyana Gold Board, that client needs to see, where did I get my gold from? Or we ask the question, what's the source of your gold? And that client can say anything to us, but we need something tangible. It therefore means that we have to go back to the GTMC to say, was this person issued a license in whatever form it is? And the GTMC has to concur or not. So we would realize that in dealing with clients on a day-to-day basis and the frequency of clients or the flow of clients, it is difficult to say to the client every time, you know, where did you get the gold from? Whether it be a new client or else, and then we have to go back. So here we see that we need collaboration with the GTMC. And this is not only for just the clients or the miners. but we have traders who are licensed by GTMC, and as such, they need to say where these persons are licensed and location, that's it, where they're licensed. So Guyana Gold Board's legislation says that the trader needs to bring the book to the Guyana Gold Board to check. And in the likewise, in like manner, GTMC also is saying, so there is, right there is, I would want to say conflict. Let's put it that way. Just using it mildly, conflict. And because the trader will say, if I have to take it to the person who gave me the license, why do I have to bring it to you? And so we need to have that rectified. And I think a great way we have started that, and it has been going quite nicely. Guyana Gold Board also has to put up with the clients and producing documentation. And in many instances, documentation seemed an uphill task for our clients. It's either they're waiting on some compliance, they're waiting for something, and because the Act says that the Guyana Gold Board has to purchase all gold produced in Guyana, you cannot turn away the client. Then we have a conflict here that we don't know where the metal comes from, because we also do not know, the client also doesn't have all the documentation. And then purchasing the gold may put us at odds with our overseas partners, mainly where we refine our gold. So there it is, we have to do training, we have to do teaching, and ensure that our clients understand, because our clients come to a place where they may seem very frustrated, and they may say, I can go someplace else and get rid of my gold for money. So the Guyana Gold Board is faced with that situation. Then another thing, the Guyana Gold Board also, I use the term quite loosely here, we do not know the DNA of a gold. The clients may say that I worked in X part of the country and I have recovered this gold. But how do we know that it didn't come over the border from Venezuela? We do not have the wherewithal to test and to see that this metal is not from Guyana. And we're looking to see somewhere along the line, whichever chemist or whoever can come up with whatever technology that they can say, well, listen, this gold is not from Guyana, and we will not be at odds. So even when there is the cry, the who and the cry about smuggling, how could we say, yes, we're using quite a lot of other mechanism to say, where did you get the gold from? And the main thing is, the GTMC issue you a license. Was it signed off by any mines officer? We have to rely on GTMC's mines officer. And I don't know, Mr. Dennison is here, the Geology and Mines Commissioner. I don't know that he can say that he has mines officers to run the entire interior to know that every iota miner is being investigated. So that's where we're at the Guyana Gold Board, and we are coming to our 4th round of mutual evaluation. And the Guyana Gold Board would not like to know or to be in a position, because of our limitations, that the gold sector has placed Guyana in a position to be blacklisted. So these are all points that we would like to have ironed out, and we are working assiduously to that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thompson. It was very great to hear all the different perspectives that our panelists have brought up. And Similarly, we have a handful of questions for our panelists. So I like to dive straight into it to maximize the time that we have here today. And also, if some of our panelists and some of our great participants could stay a little longer, maybe that's 6 o'clock today, since this is the last panel we have, we might be able to take up some more questions. If you have other engagement, I would totally understand you need to log off. But in case you could stay on and answer some more questions, maybe we can get more of these questions answered. Now let's get started with the first one. What mechanisms are there to ensure women's safety and human rights to decent work in the extractive industries? Who would like to take this question? Let me repeat it again. What mechanisms are there to ensure women's safety and human rights to decent work in the extractive industries?
Perhaps I can start.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Ben.
Okay, so there are several mechanisms that are in place, and perhaps I can mention, for instance, in the context of the forestry sector, there's community forestry, which takes quite a lot of consideration for the role of women at the level of the community, being owners of chainsaws, you know, and at various levels of the supply chain within the forestry sector. And so there's a very active process of ensuring that women have the opportunity to be able to participate in community forest associations and benefit from being able to earn. In addition to that, there's a lot of training by the Forestry Training Center that addresses safety issues within the forestry sector. And I think I'll stop here and pass over to Mr. Dennison so he can talk about the other things within the mining sector.
Okay, good setup for that. But the truth of the matter is that women do play a very important role in mining. And if we start from the regulator, I can say to you that GTMC is an equal opportunity employer. We don't discriminate on the basis of gender. And the body of employees that have been coming to us, in fact, in some instances, have been outnumbering the males for the last, I would say, the last 10 years or thereabouts. When we pulled for scholarships, we have been getting more females than males, but that's another social issue because it speaks to how our males are responding to the school environment. Within communities, there are women who dominate because, especially if they're single parents, they have to earn, and they go out there and they work foot to foot with the men. I've seen that in even some of the Amerindian titled areas where the women folk are the ones who are out there putting in even Steven with the men. I think one of the greatest concerns is their exposure and security, and perhaps to the absence of proper health and welfare services. We would find that that could be something that would mitigate against women properly being placed in the sector and operating there for the livelihood. I'll pass on to people who are more capable in that direction than I am.
I thank you so much, Mr. Dennison and Ms. Ben. We have some more questions, so if it was okay with the panelists, then I'd like to move on to the next question. And it is specific to Mr. Ali. Could Mr. Ali indicate whether within the private sector in Guyana, there is a quote-unquote conflict between investment in innovation and research and maximizing profit?
Thank you, Katie. That's a very important question. And I believe we have to look at it at two levels. So there's the local private sector, and then there are foreign investors within the sector, the extractive sector. And I think you will find that with the foreign investors, they would invest in innovation and research because in many instances, they are mandated to do so by law from the country in which they are incorporated. So they therefore transfer their technology and innovation to their investments overseas, in this case, Guyana. From a domestic private sector perspective, yes, I do believe that there is a conflict. Many companies do put profit in front of investment in innovation and research. And as I mentioned, I believe that incentives have to be provided to bring them up to that level and standard, as well as laws put in place, legislation put in place to ensure that those requirements and modern technology are utilized. I also saw in that question Denise wanted to know about the role that the private sector in Guyana could play in innovation and research. And I do think that they can play a very critical role in the development of innovation and research, both as a promoter of it in business, as well as a beneficiary of it as well. As a matter of fact, tomorrow, AmCham Guyana will be launching its Young Entrepreneurs Program, where we will be mentoring young business leaders and CEOs on the need for innovation and research development, as well as raising their awareness with regards to how to go about doing that, how to go about doing this. So we have lined up, we're working with the Professor Porter Initiative, the GDI, the Guyana Development Initiative, as well as some renowned speakers from all around the world, to talk to young business leaders about the need for innovation, the need to embrace it, the need for research development. And that will be an ongoing program. Every 6 months, we will have a new batch of young CEOs, young business leaders who will be taught this from a chamber perspective. So that's a role, to answer your last question about the role that the private sector is playing in that regard.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ali. That's really great to know that tomorrow you're launching this program. I'm sure many people will benefit from it. Now, the next question is, what are some of the measures that GFC has put in place to address the challenges of competing issues? And there's a little follow-up to this, so let me get the little follow-up as well. Also, is there any conversations regarding miners and loggers meeting each other halfway for mining sites? For example, loggers being able to take the timber out first.
Okay, so thank you for the question. There's a multi-pronged approach to several of these challenges that are faced by persons within the extractive sector. I don't want to just single it out to it appearing as if it's just miners versus loggers. But one of the initiatives has been, and it needs to perhaps get a bit more energy, is to have enhanced collaboration and information sharing across the agencies within the natural resources sector. And I believe that through the Ministry of Natural Resources and the re-energizing of this committee, the joint committee across the agencies, can help to address that. But also quickly, just to say that information sharing is important. Engaging with persons, for instance, through the example of the multi-stakeholder steering committee that was established for the LCDS, is a good example of how persons across various sectors and within different roles can have the opportunity to share the issues that they face and to together address to find solutions to address those challenges. And just as an aside, before I leave this issue, but let me say as well that the Forestry Commission is working with the GTMC, particularly, for instance, and the Ministry of Public Works and the Ministry of Natural Resources, to look, for instance, at road management, maintenance of infrastructure, and having a workable solution of how those roads are maintained, and the mechanism by which they'll be used. So I believe that it's a work in progress. It's not ideal, but I think we're going in the right direction. I think just going back, permit me to go back just quickly to the issue about gender, because I think it would be a big miss if we don't mention the Guyana Women Miners Association organization. They do fantastic work in Guyana. They address a lot of the issues that affect women, not only within the mining sector, but the livelihood strategies, being a voice for them, a voice for the voiceless, addressing trafficking and so on. So I want to put that on the table. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bent. It was wonderful. Now, the next question is relating to women and migrants, in fact. What measures are in place to prevent exploitation of Venezuelan migrants and refugee women who seek employment in the industry? Which one of our panelists would you like to take on this question?
Let me see if I may be able to add some light on that. And GTMC is out there, and all persons who work in the mining sector ought to be properly documented. So it starts from that point. GTMC does not have a tolerance level for undocumented persons. So if our officers encounter at any mine site, well, women in particular, or children, as the case may be, or undocumented persons, then there is a removal of those persons from there. They're put in touch with the police station, transported out of the area. So that is one way. Of course, we've already found ourselves battling the fact that some of these women, or these, I would say, foreigners, they would hide themselves, conceal themselves when our officers are coming, because, of course, it's a livelihood that they are seeking, and they would not want to be returned to or repatriated to the country. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is that we also have a very low tolerance for the employment of people in general, whether it's foreigners or Guyanese, on the landings, where there are all kinds of unwholesome activities. So foreigners can get caught up, the women can get caught up in that, because they are trafficked for exactly those kinds of activities. And our officers are in a position to identify and remove. We do have occasions where we work with the Ministry of Social Protection to do search and rescues, and that is done also for trafficking, with trafficking in persons, and in conjunction with the Women Miners Organization. So those are the mechanisms that are there to help, but there is a lot more need for the social interventions rather than the regulatory interventions that we do. And if I may just step back a bit and just touch on a little bit on the past question, where there is coordination between miners and loggers for when trees are felled and so on, we have to remember that in some instances where the miners are operating, it's not cost effective at all for the loggers to go and pull out those logs. So there has been talk from time to time, and I think it's starting again, on issuing the miner with some kind of temporary or conditional license that allows them to commercialize the logs that they may knock over as they're clearing their mining grounds.
If I may please, Madam Moderator, just to say that that facility already exists at the Guyana Forestry Commission. So a miner can make an application to the Forestry Commission to say that they're going into a particular area, which is identified on a map, and the officers would go and inspect it, and then based on, they can get permission to for harvest and removal and sale. So that process exists and is working.
Thank you for that addition, Miss Wen. And with heavy heart, I have to say that we are at time for today's panel discussion. And I would like to extend my greatest honor and thanks to all of our panelists today. So let me just say thank you so much for Mr. Zulfikar Ali, for Ms. Vanessa Ben, for Mr. Newell Dennison, for Mr. Denzel Roberts, and for Ms. Eandrine Thompson for sharing your experience, your perspective, your knowledge, and all that care that you put into your work and for the prosperity of your beloved country. This is officially the last session of our first day of the Guyana Extractives Sector Transparency Week. And I would like to just show our audience and our great panelists what is in store for tomorrow. This event goes until Friday, and tomorrow on Tuesday, we have both panel discussions and also presentations. We will kick it off at 9 o'clock in the morning with the Guyana EITI and with a brief overview of its accomplishments and challenges to date. And then we're going to dive into the commodity trading and what is transparency there and why is it so important to Guyana. That's starting at 10:30 in the morning. Now, after lunch, we will resume our program with Women's Brave Sojourn in Male-Dominated Industry and a gender look at the sector. And we are moving on to a panel discussion from there on, working career. What are the opportunities in the extractive sector from a labor perspective? Then we have some great documentaries with some lively discussion and some mystery happening in the afternoon at 3 o'clock. And then at the end of the day, we will wrap it up with extractives and open government. And that's going to take us to the end of day 2 tomorrow. And don't go much further today because we do have an informal part of the conference, which is our cocktail networking. We will get started with that at 3:30. If I can bring your attention to the chat, I have put on a couple of important links for you there. The cocktail networking is very informal, very upbeat and lighthearted. There are no presentations, just us participants, experts, people interested in the sector in transparency, connecting to person, even through this virtual world that we are living right now. And the link is right there in the chat, so grab it for yourself and join us with your favorite drink or not. At 6:30. We would love to have a little bit of informal conversation. And with that, I want to say thank you for our esteemed guest of panelists and for our awesome audience, for all of the great questions and the excellent perspectives that you have shared with us throughout today's panel discussion, just here at the end of the day and throughout the whole day. With that, thank you so much. We will see you at the networking cocktail hour.